Today, and we can assume for the next 10 days, rabbis around the world will be giving sermons about the meaning of Rosh Hashanah, the days of awe, and the upcoming Yom Kippur. And on this and next Sundays, there probably will be many, many Unitarian Universalist ministers that will be doing the same. Among these thousands of sermons about these special days in the Jewish tradition, these special days will be examined in many ways, with many thoughts and many interpretations. So today, the worship committee decided that we could bring to this congregation a couple of different perspectives about the implications of the days of awe for Unitarian Universalists from other UU ministers. The two sermons that were selected for this service present slightly different perspectives on the meaning of Unitarian Universalism, meaning for Unitarian Universalists of the days of awe and of Rosh Hashanah. Margaret Polski will be reading an extended excerpt from a sermon by the Reverend Elizabeth Green. Elizabeth was a classmate of mine a number of years ago. She was a minister for 25 years in Boise, Idaho, and now is currently serving the Magic Valley UU Fellowship in Twin Falls, Idaho. Eleanor will be presenting an excerpt from a sermon by the Reverend Douglas Taylor, who currently serves our congregation in Binghamton, New York. He also served in Cedar Lane UU Church in Bethesda, Maryland. Now, we've also incorporated, because you see if you look at the order of service, some meditation time in this sermon presentations. This meditation time is for us to reflect on what has been said and its possible implications for us in our lives and here at Channing Church.
This evening, and in fact, this very evening, is the first day of the Jewish month of Tishrei, the seventh and richest month in the Jewish calendar. On this night, the eerie, untuned shofar, a ram's horn, is blown. On this night, it is said, God opens 3 books and inscribes every human name in each one of them. The thoroughly righteous, those acting always out of loving kindness, in right relationship with God, are written in the book of life. The thoroughly wicked, who practice injustice and hatred, who have turned away from God, are written in the book of death. All those in between are written in the middle book for 1 week. But because God is a God of mercy as well as justice, we, who were deemed questionable, have a chance to be transferred to the book of life and sealed there for the upcoming year. We look toward Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, 10 days hence, knowing that we have the intervening days, the days of awe, in which we can practice Shuvah. Shuvah is related to repentance, but it is deeper and broader than that. It means return to our original state of oneness with God. It means turning about, turning to, genuinely turning our backs on our transgressions and misdeeds, turning our back to the righteousness and loving kindness, turning back to the righteousness and loving kindness that are the hallmarks of right relationship with God. Shuvah involves much searching of the soul. In the Jewish faith, salvation is by no means God's responsibility alone. On the contrary, most of the burden rests upon our human shoulders, for the Lord expects us to take responsibility for what we do. God forgives transgressions against God, but human failures must be repented of and atoned for by us in our own world, in our own communities. The days of awe, the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are to be spent in deep, solemn, joyous soul-searching and rebuilding right relationships. There is wonder at knowing that our deepest and highest self, toward which we strive, reflects the perfection of that which we most hold high. I'm very moved by the Jewish annual observance of these high holy days, by the practice of Shiva. Modern Unitarian Universalist tradition has no ritual time of soul-searching and assessment of character. In fact, our emphasis on the worth of the individual causes us to seldom mention our shortcomings. I wish we did. The process humbles and strengthens and brings joy. Deep, unflinching self-examination, remorse and repentance for falling short of the mark, atonement in word and deed, these bring salvation, healing, a larger heart, and a lighter soul, ready to plunge into the year's cycle all over again. My guess is that it will be a very, very long time before Unitarian Universalists adopt an institutional practice of examination, repentance, atonement, and salvation. But it is one that we may practice as individuals. We need not be observant Christians, Jews, or even theists to practice Shiva. Is there a one among us who does not aspire to act more in accordance with our ideals than we do? We may not often consider such matters of the soul in day-to-day life, which is one reason that Judaism sets aside a particular time each year. But our longing for goodness and harmony is always with us, somewhere within us, nonetheless. Perhaps the metaphor of God does not inspire you with a sense of awe, which lifts you. Longing for goodness, truth, peace, right relationship. If not, what does? The interdependent web? Taken seriously, interdependence is a truly awesome concept. Perhaps it is the soaring reaches of art, music, literature, created by men and women of sublime talent. Pondering beauty can pull us right into awe. Whatever calls you to a sense of wonder and dread, calls you to a sense of how much there is that we but dimly apprehend. These things also call you to live toward your highest ideals. If we practice Shiva, we can become a stronger community, and we can strengthen our own and others' worth and dignity. And that's the end of Reverend Green's words. Now, I wonder if you will join me in the responsive reading number 637 in the back of your gray hymnal. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit. For losing sight of our unity. For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
I'm about to read an excerpt from a work by the Reverend Douglas Taylor, but in fairness to Reverend Taylor, I have to admit that this excerpt has undergone some considerable editorializing by me. So, I leave it to you to pick out which parts might have been added. A dominant theme in this Days of Awe and Yom Kippur season is that of turning from callousness and indifference, turning from pettiness and hostility, turning and returning to that which is holy, that which is good, turning back to our best selves. The Day of Atonement is the holiest day of the Jewish year. It comes as the 10th day of the Days of Awe, the first day of which is Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. The 10 days of the New Year are called the Days of Awe because people feel fear as well as reverence during this special time of judgment and forgiveness. There's a well-known story about forgiveness in Jewish folk tradition. In the story, a humble shopkeeper sits down during the Days of Awe to make a list of all his misdeeds over the course of the year. At the same time, he makes a second list, detailing the woes of the world attributable to God. When he finishes, he looks at the two lists side by side and he says out loud, all right, so I told my customers the fruit was straight from the farm when it was really a week old. But you let that little girl down the street get sick. I let my temper get the best of me and shoved my brother for leaving the shop a mess. But you created the flies that buzz all over my shop and everything in it. When I hit my thumb with a hammer, I took your name in vain. But that thunderstorm of yours ruined a lot of crops and flooded folks out of house and home. And it went on like that until at last the shopkeeper said, so, G-D, I'll tell you what, if you'll forgive me, I'll forgive you. We'll call it even and start the new year fresh. Pretty impressive, this act of taking moral inventory every year. This act of seeking and offering forgiveness. Is there anything comparable in our Unitarian tradition? Well, there's this professor, a member of a Unitarian congregation, who shares his own spiritual discipline. He says that before he goes to bed, he pours himself a cognac, sits in his easy chair with the lights low, sipping his drink, and thinks back on the day, trying to see the ways in which he said and done things that might have hurt someone unnecessarily. And then he would think on the things others said or did that he found hurtful to himself. Finally, he would say a little prayer of forgiveness and go to bed, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day. It's been proven, by the way, that you can even do this daily ritual and it works very well without the alcoholic drink. As Unitarian Universalists, we often say that every day is a new day, and that the beloved community is something we live for in the present. If this is truly our belief, we must accept that every day is also Judgment Day, and every day deserves our taking personal, moral inventory. Truth is, though, we don't. And so, without a doubt, once a year, Yom Kippur is a perfectly reasonable place to start. So what goes into our personal moral inventory? Do we include our weaknesses, such as, I think I need to work on my personal hygiene. I have poor organizational skills. I have trouble asking for help when I'm in over my head. But these are not moral issues. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, "Thou shalt not write thy phone messages on little scraps of paper and lose them." The moral self-inventory people go through during the days of awe is about specific actions, not character flaws. We need to push ourselves with questions like, was I honest in my dealings with other people? Was I greedy? Did I think of the needs of others? Was I kind? Part of making this list is figuring out just what goes on the list. Lingering animosity toward a family member, a grudge against a coworker or a neighbor, displays of disrespect toward our parents, children, promises made and not kept. All this and the like could go on your list. But making a list is not enough. To get to forgiveness, there are a few more steps involved. Forgiveness is not an easy thing to grasp intellectually, nor is it easy to follow through in daily life. Forgiveness involves 3 steps: confession, atonement, and repentance. Now let's look at confession. First, you must admit to what errors you've made over the course of the year. Making this list, either mentally or in a journal or in a letter, it's a powerful cleansing activity. Second, atonement. You need to follow through on your list. Now, some have suggested calling up those people you have injured or hurt to say, "I'm sorry." Or you might call up people who have hurt you and say, "I forgive you." But the possibility of blowback from calls like that are just too explosive to contemplate. I mean, just imagine, for example, the person at the other end of the line responding with, "Your forgiveness? I don't want your forgiveness. I told you you're an idiot, and I meant it." Or worse, "I'm sorry, what did you say your name was?" So you might just want to keep it to yourself. You might want to just burn your list in a small fire and say a little prayer to God, to the universe, to yourself, saying, "I am sorry, forgive me, I forgive you," and let it go. This is the moment of reconciliation. Doesn't do you any good to hold on to your anger and animosities against others. Let it go. Of course, sometimes to atone, we may need to do more than just say sorry. Sometimes we need to make amends. And often, making amends leads to the 3rd step of forgiveness, which is repentance. We promise ourselves that we will return to the path of goodness. We promise ourselves not to repeat the wrongs that were on our list this year. Confession, atonement, and repentance. We promise to return to our best selves, Unitarians and others and all of us.